Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My next guest is Stuart Sorkin. Now, Stuart is an amazing fella and has been helping the collision industry for many, many years. Matter of fact, he's worked alongside of some of the legends in our industry, Elena Sashry, Mike Anderson. You've helped, wow, over the last 35 years, you've helped a bunch of shops with exit strategies and succession plans. So a lot of intricate knowledge about the collision industry, and of course his formal background is you're an attorney, you're a CPA, so you've got a lot of really powerful knowledge about the collision industry, and that's why I wanted to get you on the show and just talk to you about this whole new plan the government's coming out with, the aid package. And so thanks for joining me, Stuart. This is truly an honor. What are you hearing out there? What are you seeing in the early stages of this government relief plan? And what are your first impressions?
I think that the plan, it will help people, but I think that people do have some real misconceptions of some of the consequences, even of the SBA loan forgiveness provisions, and the effects of them, what and how to qualify for them, and whether or not these types of loans are going to be valuable for everyone.
Right. Are there restrictions to the PPP loans, and how does that work?
Yes. The fact is the PPP loan must be used for either payroll costs, interest to pay mortgages on obligations incurred before February 15th, 2020, payments of rent on leases before February 15th of 2020, and payments of utilities are all what you would call allowable expenses for purposes that you can spend the proceeds of a PPP loan.
I got you. Interesting. So don't rush out and buy a new boat, is what you're saying.
Yes, you will not get forgiveness if you go out and buy a boat.
I got you. I'm with you. What is the maximum amount that a shop or a business could expect from these loans?
Under the rules, you can get 2.5 times your monthly payroll, and that payroll can include independent contractors who are going to report the income as self-employment income. However, any employee who earns more than $100,000, only the first $100,000 is included, i.e. $8,333 per month appears to be the maximum you can take for any employee over, or contractor over 100 who's earning over $100,000.
Okay.
The overall limit, though, is to one taxpayer, and there are some affiliation rules with regard to common ownerships of companies, is $10 million. One of the things that I've talked about to some of my clients is those that are earning more than $100,000, you should possibly talk to them and get them to potentially agree to some form of salary deferral of anything above the $100,000 until such time as we are at least out of the stay-at-home law rules, and potentially for some period afterwards, and then pay that out over the remainder of the year or possibly into next year.
I like that. Wow, that's pretty cool. So I didn't know about the that you could actually have it for outside vendors, or I guess subcontractors you'd mentioned.
Yes.
And do they have to have any kind of history, the subcontractors, do they have to have any kind of history with the business in order to, like if you all of a sudden go out and hire a few subcontractors or subs?
No, the issue is that it is based on you have 2 periods in which you base the numbers on. You base them on your payroll, either at the payroll period from January 1st to February 29th of this year, or the period of February 15th, 2019 through June 30th of 2019. So that's how that is what the base, when you go in for the loan, you're going to have proof of your payroll. So if you had existing independent contractors on one of those 2 dates,
Mm-hmm.
then they would count in the number.
I got you.
And this is a selection which the borrower or the company will make. So they need to look at which payroll period is going to be better for complying with the forgiveness provisions. So you need to probably look at your payroll as an example. If your payroll has dropped between, if your payroll has increased since the middle of last year, you may want to use the earlier numbers with regard to your employee costs, so you don't have to worry about the forgiveness provision, not complying with the forgiveness provisions because you've had a reduction in payroll. And we will talk about that in a minute with regard to how.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that leads right into the kind of the next thing that we were all thinking about is, what are the requirements to get the forgiveness for this loan?
The maximum amount that can be forgiven is the allowable expenses, which are the ones I discussed before.
Right.
That are incurred over an 8-week period commencing with the day the loan is funded. If you have a reduction in employees, then there is a proportional reduction in the amount that would be forgiven. So if the forgiveness reduces the aggregate total wages in excess of 25% to the most prior recent quarter, then there's going to be a reduction in the amount that's forgiven. Now that leads to really a couple of different planning points. One is that under the statute, it says that changes in the number of employees between February 15th and 30 days after the date of enactment, which would be April 26th, do not count for purposes of a reduction in your forgiveness if they are fully employed by June 30th. So here is one where you may look at a couple of different things. One, if you're looking at a reduction in employees, you should not apply for your loan until after you've completed the reduction, because once you report your payroll costs to get the loan, you're stuck with that set of numbers. I have a couple of clients who have looked at the idea of saying that they're going to close for potentially the next 2 weeks, which would still allow them to have everyone on staff by April 26th. But the idea of closing the facility,
right,
having it completely cleaned, because obviously one of the areas where coronavirus has become an issue is it lives on metal a lot longer than most other surfaces, since most body shops and in the auto industry are dealing with a lot of metal. The idea of having the shop completely emptied out and cleaned and then sitting for 2 weeks probably deals with any potential virus in the office. And then the idea that a lot of my clients are looking at is that they're going to bring their staff back up potentially 50% within this 26 by April 26th. And the reason they're only going to take half is because then they'll have another half that they can bring on in a week or two, in 2 weeks, where they know those people are completely clean.
Right.
And you also have automatically people out there who, if someone does develop the virus, then you have a replacement. One of the other things which I think that a lot of my clients are also looking at is that when an employee first reports back to work after this closure, that they're required that their temperature is taken, and if they have a fever, they're immediately sent home, and then they could take advantage of the sick leave provisions that are in the bill with regard to credits for sick leave.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So if they're running hot, they send them home and there's that. Okay. Very interesting. So I guess another thing is, if a company receives the PPP loan, how does the company receive the actual forgiveness? What does that mechanism look like that they've got out there for the shops?
There will be an application that has to be made to the lender who you get the loan from. The lender has to approve it within 60 days. The idea here is that you won't be able to apply for forgiveness until 8 weeks after the loan is been issued, because that's the measuring period for purposes of retention of employees. If the loan is not forgiven, then the loan can term out to as long as 10 years. The interest rate will not exceed 4%.
Right.
And then the loan will allow that there can be there will be a minimum of a 6-month deferral on payments, and that could go up to no more than 1 year. And the last point is that a lot of people like about these loans are there are no personal guarantees, there are no requirements for collateral, and there is no prepayment penalty. Right. So unlike typical loans, you don't have to show a balance sheet with assets, you don't have to personally guarantee it, and you can pay it off at any time with no penalty.
So, I mean, this is full steam ahead for really everybody. They need to start capitalizing on this. So
yes, as I said, today is the first day that banks are accepting loans, the applications for loans. But if you're going to look at the planning point that I discussed earlier with regard to laying off employees for the next couple of weeks potentially, then you'll have to wait to make your loan, to apply for the loan. The only concern that I have about these loans are there may not be enough money there. Banks may run out.
Right.
You wait too long. So there is an interplay of the planning piece of employees cutting costs versus the possibility that if you wait too long, there may not be enough money there.
Yeah, I think that's always a concern, right? I mean, this is an unprecedented time. If this thing drags out, I mean, if it's not the end of April, I know you guys were in the US, we're talking Easter, then it's end of April. Now there's speculation it could go longer. What is the thought there? Will the feds continue to fund this thing or keep it going? And any rumors out there about that?
There is clear rumors of a fourth package.
Okay.
At this point in time, the House has already started working on some of that. The Senate is saying they want to wait and see how this plan goes through. The one issue that clearly is going to be looked at, though, is the $1,200 that's going out per individual sometime in April. Right. If this thing goes all the way into May, they have to they will probably put in another $1,200 for May payments as well. So that's one thing. Plus, there are some other incentives that they're looking at to try to jumpstart the economy, because right now, this package is hopefully just, as I think one senator said, the United States government is effectively absorbing the payroll costs of approximately 60 to 75% of the U.S. of those that are employed by using this type of planning.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, which leads me to the next question, which is, what are the income tax consequences for a company once they've received this loan?
Well, if they spend the loan proceeds for the allowable costs, those will create a tax deduction. However, when you repay back that loan, you're going to have to pay it back in quote after-tax income, because in order to generate the cash flow to make the payments, it's going to have to be from quote profits. Now, the other side is that people say, "Oh, they're forgiving the loan. I have no consequences." Well, that's not true. The legislation specifically says that if the loan is forgiven, then it is going to be subject to cancellation of indebtedness income, which does generate income for the taxpayer. So if you took out a $100,000 loan and it is forgiven, you will have, upon forgiveness, $100,000 of additional income in that year. So that has to be planned for with regard to estimated tax payments, etc. But obviously there's some flexibility because the IRS has already said that they're not going to really impose interest and penalties for estimated tax payments as long as you comply with their extended rules in that regard.
I gotcha. Wow. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I think that'll be good for shops to get their heads wrapped around. So what is the refundable payroll tax credit? What's that?
The refundable payroll tax credit is if you have fewer than 100 employees, you can get a credit of up to $10,000 per employee against your payroll taxes if your operations were suspended by the government, or if you had more than a 50% reduction in your quarterly receipts on a year-over-year basis. So obviously, a lot of shops are going to face that issue. Is that they are going to see they could see a 50% cut. So the issue you have to worry about there is this credit will affect the employment tax issue. Can clearly be used to reduce your employment tax liability. And again, the idea here is though that it is limited to $10,000 per person, but it's still a nice piece if you're in the situation where you've had a dramatic drop in your income.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. So, I mean, taking a look at everything you're seeing, I mean, you're going to see a lot of different moving parts. I know you got clients from Alaska to basically coast to coast, right? And
yes.
And they're playing around in the collision industry, and no two markets are really the same right now. Everybody's feeling the pressures. Some are way down, some are a little bit down. But as this thing continues on, what do you feel will be the lasting effects to the collision industry from all this?
I think that it's likely that I've been telling clients for the last year that if you are thinking about exiting, you probably should have exited last year or earlier this year to maximize your dollars, or you should be making a commitment to stay probably 3 to 5 years. I believe that the coronavirus will probably increase the number of shops that are in trouble.
Right.
And therefore, there's going to be some potential bargains for those who have cash or those who have liquidity for growth. And then obviously, as you grow, you gain economies of scale. So I think you're going to see beyond the big guys, Caliber and Gerber, et cetera, who are consolidators, I think that you're going to see a lot of the larger shops or more well-capitalized shops trying to build a more regional market for themselves to gain economies of scale and also to add value that if they are ever bought by a consolidator, because a consolidator is going to pay you a lot more for a geographical region than they're going to pay you for 1 or 2 shops. So those that have cash. And the other side is that right now, if you go to a bank to try to get a loan, it's going to be difficult because they are going to be absolutely swamped with dealing with the PPP loans. And they're also working with telecommuting and other types of issues. So getting bank financing right now is going to be a little more difficult. However, the banks have a lot of money to lend based on how the Federal Reserve has opened credit, and they want to open credit beyond the PPE. So after we get through this initial crunch with the PPP loans, I think that you will see a lot of banks trying to push loans. And with historically low interest rates, if you can borrow money now at 3 or 4%, if you can't If you can't make more money by acquiring another company and make more than 4%, then you probably shouldn't be in the business.
Right. Yeah. I mean, money's, the lenders are going to be aggressive. And I think that's what's going to help really fuel the economy on the bounce back too. We're starting to look towards, okay, we're on the sharp down right now, but soon there'll be a bottom and there'll be a bounce. And how do you position yourself properly so that, as you come out of the down cycle into and I'm hoping it's going to be a sharper recovery than we're expecting. But, what should business owners do today, in this situation?
Okay, well, I'm going to say that in my years of experience with entrepreneurs, and especially in the body shop industry, most owners spend 99% of their time working in their business and 1% on their business.
Right.
You now have this idea, you now have this period of time where you don't necessarily have to spend 99% of your time on your business. And I think you should use your time wisely to develop a 5-year plan, to figure out, okay, when this is ending, am I going to be a buyer? Am I going to be a seller? Am I going to stay, or am I going to try to just stay where I'm at? The point is that I think that every business should develop a 5-year plan of where they want the business to be in 5 years, whether that is exit or from a growth standpoint. Because if you don't create a 5-year plan, you can't create measurable milestones to figure out if you're getting there.
Right.
So don't waste this time. Use this time to help develop what you want your business to be over the future. So when we come out of this period, you can hit the ground running and have a plan that's going to help grow the business or get it ready for sale. And that's the other point is, if
Sure.
you are ones that are thinking about sale, then this is the time when you're slow to do all of the due diligence, build your due diligence library now when you're slow. Look at things of how you might be able to add value to the business right now. And these are the kinds of things that I work with clients on, especially in the body shop area, of how to add value to your business and how to grow it and successfully exit from it.
I like it. No, I think that's some really sound advice. I was talking to a guy and he says, you know what, Ryan, my 5-year plan is to get through this year. And I thought, that's how we all feel. I mean, this is a rough, bumpy, and I think the uncertainty plays a major role. But I like your advice about trying to leverage this time to your advantage to position yourself, whether you're looking for a succession, an exit, maybe using this time to start figuring out how do we grow, how do we acquire more shops. So I think that's some really good advice. I know there's a lot of people depend on you for advice, Stuart, and I don't want to throw this out there lightly, but if shops want to reach out or have additional questions, would you be available for these shops if they got questions?
Yes. What I might suggest is that what I'm doing with 1 or 2 other groups is that if they have questions, they should maybe submit them to you, and then we can do a webinar.
Yeah.
A second webinar regarding the questions that are being raised. Because rather than trying to answer each individual question, I think I'd rather see, and we could schedule something for maybe next week at this time or later.
Yeah.
When they get the questions to you, and then we can sit down and we can have a further conversation about this.
That sounds great. Yeah. And so I'll put that out there, guys. If you have questions, I'll make sure my information's in here so you can submit the questions. Stuart and I, you and I can review these offline, and then what we can do is compile a follow-up, because this is such a fluid situation and it changes almost by the day. So, I think that's a very generous offer, Stuart. So thank you for that.
And let me add one other thing. If any shop is saying, I hear what he's saying about a 5-year plan, but I don't know where to begin, I will be more than happy to have a complimentary half-hour consultation with that company to talk about it. The only thing that I ask is that I have a 2-page questionnaire that I would ask them to fill out beforehand. So in the 30 minutes, I'm not just learning about their business. I already know something about their business, and then can give them hopefully some good advice based on where they're at, on how to get where they need to go.
That's a really awesome. I like that. I think that's going to be well received. So thank you, Stuart, for joining us. We'll wrap it up there, and we'll look forward to doing a second segment of this as the situation continues to unravel. Thanks again.
Thank you for your time, and I hope everyone stays safe and survives this very stressful period.